This is the BrainChip podcast. Hear from our thought leaders about neuromorphic computing, beneficial AI, and how BrainChip's Akida is pushing AI to the edge. This podcast is a place for investors, practitioners, and anyone interested in the future of AI.
Hi all, I'm Rob Telson, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at BrainChip. Welcome, and thank you for joining our 6th episode of our BrainChip podcast series. These events are structured to provide current and future investors and those interested in the BrainChip technology as a path to better understand who we are, what we are doing, and where we are going. Just to recap, our first 4 episodes focused on BrainChip, our company history, who we are, where we are going, and the perspectives from our founders, the Brain, Peter Vandermeide, and the Chip, Anil Mankar. Our 5th episode, we journeyed into the ecosystem and focused on the outside looking in with the discussion with Alex Davinsky, also known as ticker symbol U, the channel that invests in you based on YouTube. If you have not listened to any of these podcasts, please go to our website, www.brainchip.com, go to our Learn tab, and select podcasts. You can also listen to any of these podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Today, we will continue with our outside looking in theme by having a discussion with Rob Lincourt, distinguished engineer at Dell Technologies. Rob has spent over 20 years with Dell focused on technology introductions. Rob, on behalf of BrainChip and our listeners, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for the invite and having me today. It's a pleasure.
Well, you know, I can only imagine the types of technology innovations and introductions you've experienced in your career, Rob. You are a true technologist who has been involved with over a dozen patents and truly epitomizes the phrase out-of-the-box thinker. I had the opportunity to read your paper titled Security Reshaped in the Digital Transformation Era. It provided great insight on how we can protect ourselves moving through these rapidly evolving times. Rob, why don't you take a moment and provide our listeners with a bit of background on yourself?
I work in the global CTO office. And what we do there is it's all about looking at emerging technologies, understanding them, understanding the impact to the industry, as well as to Dell Technologies. So I'm here today with you from a Dell Technologies point of view, not a specific Dell product line view. And we won't talk anything about the product lines or any of the other Dell Technologies companies. It would strictly just be a view of the technology, of where the industry is and the impact that we have. Again, the role here is at Dell is really about understanding how new technologies are going to affect us, people. And that's where we're going to go forward from here, right, is what's new. There are a bunch of strategic areas that Dell is currently looking at. And we'll try to tie some of those into what we're talking about today.
That's great. And I think it's exciting that you have that opportunity to focus on some of these strategic areas. And as you look at the technology and how everything's evolving, what aspects currently have your interest and why?
The list is long for this short conversation we're having. I guess it's really about the intersection of a lot of these verticals or horizontal views that people are taking in the world between edge computing, AI, right? AI is really the driver why we're doing edge computing. It's so important to act on the data and get decisions and get actions out of it as soon as you can, especially when you start thinking about autonomous vehicles, when you start thinking about how hospitals of the future will work, and even how we're going to interact with it. I was just at a conference, MTech, the technology review from MIT, and we spent a whole afternoon just talking about how people are going to consume AI. So how do I have to interact with the AI in order to get you, Rob, to believe me and to understand the results and trust in the results that I'm giving you? So there's this whole new human dynamic coming in to the AI space. So all of those spaces together, and I mean, obviously, none of this can happen without cloud in some way, shape, or form. But we feel that that data can't move all the way back to the cloud every single time for every single decision. the latencies just aren't there. Now, cloud might slide out a little bit, right? So there's going to be this huge concept of edge and in these notions that edge is everywhere. And the funny thing is, with a lot of the topics we talk about, is it's all about perspective. So where's the edge from where I am standing? Is it at the device? And the device can be a sensor, a camera, a monitor, a microphone. And then it can go all the way back to a car. So imagine a car being a device and now moving all the way back to the telco networks. I can do processing there now, especially with 5G and the ability to move data and segment data and all this other fun stuff. Smart cities start to become a reality, smart buildings, all of these things interacting together are all edges. So it depends where you're standing, what you see.
It's a really good point. And it's one of these areas that BrainChip, personally, we're differentiating ourselves from our opinion and from where the market is today and where AI is moving. It's moving very fast, as you highlighted, and the fact that edge becomes a really big part of the discussion. And a lot of companies with their deep learning accelerators look at edge as the edge of the cloud and the edge of the data center. And with BrainChip and our Akida product, we're focused on the edge at the sensor or the device. And there being, billions of IoT devices out there right now, and it's only increasing at a rapid rate each year. We look at the edge and focus on that in a different fashion than what most companies, how they approach the edge today. How do you see neuromorphic processing changing the face of AI?
So I think it's going to change the way we look at, like you said, at those big neural nets and the training involved and the amount of data that's needed. If I can start to do and minimize that traffic or learn a little bit at the edge and transfer some of that back or share it throughout an ecosystem, it's going to help tremendously. The other big part of it is, one thing you didn't mention was the power constraints at all those different points that we talked about. We have to now start concerning ourselves with what can we consume at different steps in that edge environment. And I think, to me, everything that I've been seeing about neuromorphic is very low powered because I can get a couple of cores, or I can get a chip with a couple more cores, and I can start to stitch them together. And that to me is the interesting thing. I also get the ability to reconfigure it. So I can use it for one set of things, and then I can bring it in almost, I don't want to say instantly because that's a precise word, but very quickly I can switch it to now start running a different neural net, and so I get all those benefits of that. And that's what I really hope to start seeing the benefits from neuromorphic, is that power and having a very nice linear power as we add more cores.
Yeah, great point. And power is definitely an area where we feel very strongly that we can make a massive impact. And the results that we're seeing with our current chip and some of the analysis that we've done so far, it is working out that way, that there's going to be this massive power reduction, which is going to end up giving companies a lot of flexibility on how they want to move forward with AI and what they want to do. What is it about BrainChip that interests you?
So again, it was that power. So you published some power numbers very early on, and those were very intriguing to us. Again, Dell Technologies has a plethora of products that throughout that edge ecosystem. And, to me, that having BrainChip as potentially as part of that environment, one, it gives us a couple of advantages. One, power, right? Again, I don't want to drain batteries. I want to operate more on batteries. The other thing is some of the other environmental aspects. If I don't use a lot of power, I don't create a lot of heat. I don't do all these other environmentals that I have to interact with or worry about. The other thing is again, that reconfigurability, right? And that ability to move it back and forth. And again, at Dell Technologies, we really want to understand where things are going in where these different technologies can be useful and where they can't be. Because you also have to look at that as well. If you want to look at, what you can do with Neuromorphic, just look at what the M5 has done from Apple. Look at what Snapdragon has from Qualcomm, right? They all have these little neuro sections, whatever they want to call it, but they're starting to learn that they can now offload all sorts of new functionality to it that they didn't really think it would matter before. So to me, BrainChip either being a companion chip, a companion to a camera, where I can do some of that object detection, face detection for doorbells, for automatic doors, for whatever you want, then it allows me to go into a whole new space where I have this heterogeneous compute, whether it's on the same die, or spread throughout multiple systems. It just depends on the scale that you can operate at. And again, that's kind of what we feel, and that's kind of what we've been trying to and playing around with, is what is that scale we can achieve with it.
That's an area where we see a lot of opportunities, and it spans from, as you said, helping out, being an engine that helps out in a larger processing area, as you call it, a companion, all the way through and being the lead engine and processing the data on the edge. As we see AI evolve and we see companies such as Dell start to make progress and move down these paths, we'll just have to see how a lot of these AI technologies evolve with it, right?
Yep.
So here at BrainChip, we talk a lot about the ways that our technology can be beneficial to society at large. We call it beneficial AI. And through our approach of focusing on the 5 sensing modalities, I don't know if you've ever seen our robot slide, but it's vision, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. What areas do you feel AI could have the most beneficial impact on society?
Interesting question, and it can go a lot of different ways. Beneficial to society, it's all going to come down to understanding if we want to accept our bias, our own bias. And I think this is going to be the hardest part for people. And there's plenty of examples, recent examples over the last few years of just not understanding the data that we have, or the processes we have in place that create bias. We just didn't know because we never looked at the data. So I'm always hesitant to talk about beneficial impact to society, because it might have a negative impact at first. Overall, I think it's totally interesting as to what we can now achieve. And if we can start to replace some mundane tasks, can I now do something else? Can I start a whole new art renaissance, right? With this concept of the 4th industrial revolution. But if I go back to those sensing capabilities, it's not them individually, it's them combined as a whole. Because now, if I can start to, I don't need to necessarily have sensors to detect on a manufacturing line if something's going wrong. If we can now sense with smelling sensors in some way, shape, or form that something is starting to burn, or a conveyor belt or a rotor or something, with vision, again, going back to manufacturing, can I detect that something is a little bit out of skew in a car, or as it's being built, or that door being laid down in a perfectly perfect position? There's all sorts of things that we can do, but I think what we have to understand is, how do we bring the human back into that? Does the human now understand those sensors, and can they take what that system is telling it and do something to help? And again, just as a side note and a little bit of a joke, but if you look right now, there's so many car recalls happening. I mean, in the millions and millions of them. That's by right. All the manufacturers. Well, could we start to detect some of these problems if we had a little bit better of these senses going down, right, inside of their testing and inside of their manufacturing? So again, it was just a note. I read something this morning on the vast number of them growing, right? So you could be beneficial that way, but you could also be beneficial in helping someone see if now we can start bringing in some more of the transplanting chips into people. we have all sorts of things we could do. But I also know there's going to be a lot of negative impact. And I think we have to balance that and understand that's the way it is. I learned from it and we move forward.
Yeah, it's a broad horizon out there. And I'm glad you brought up the points on, let's just call it industrial and manufacturing, and the impact that you can have throughout the whole supply chain, and how that there can be these positive attributes or being beneficial. No pun intended, but you're right. It is the outlook on AI. It does definitely have that social media feel to it, right? I remember when I logged into Facebook for the first time, which was eons ago, and put up some pictures of my family, right? And looked at social media today, and it's got a lot of positive attributes, but it has a lot of challenges to it as well as we evolve. And AI is going to then have some of that. And I like the fact that you brought up transplantable devices and how we can help people if they can't see. How could they feel better or touch or sense, I should say, more effectively? So there's a lot of dynamics to it, and we'll take it one step at a time. But I think as we see it evolve, there's a lot of good things that are going to come out of it as long as we get that human layer dialed in. So Rob, with cybercrime continuing to grow, there are new techniques in cybersecurity which are introduced to mitigate the increased levels of risk. This is an area where you have been involved in analyzing and educating the industry. Being able to process on the device without the dependency on the cloud can provide another layer of device security. What other areas do you feel edge-based AI processors can make a positive impact on device security?
I think there's a lot. Right. I mean, if you think about it today, we're throwing, and you made the reference of these billions of IoT devices out into the environment, and it's growing even more rapidly. Think of all the sensing that you now have in a car. If you look at some of the car platforms, they actually have cameras on the driver to detect if the driver is paying attention. How they interact is a separate issue. But imagine if someone could take control of that. Imagine now if that had to travel all the way back through a network, even if it's a 5G network, all the way back through a network to a public cloud, get routed all through the public cloud firewalls at the beginning, all the way back to your system, your service. And then that service has to call 3 or 4 other services, including the service that does the object detection and, kind of an understanding of my view and my face and my eyes, to determine if I'm distracted, and then come back and beep. Well, that could take, even if it's, a second, 2 seconds. If you're traveling at 80 miles an hour on the highway, that's still a pretty good distance, right? So you have to worry about that. Now, the car itself can protect it using other sensors. But again, what if someone got into that car? Can anyone now push code down to your car and execute it? You got to be very cautious with how that moves around. You have to start building out this concept of trust in a trusted compute environment, all the way from the car, all the way back to the cloud and everything else. But if I could just push models down to the car that have been trained and updated, with different weights and coefficients, and not sending back true data, the weights and coefficients you could tweak, but if they get out of range, you just don't have the system accept them. So there's other ways that you can do it. Even going back to the camera and the doorbell, right? If you now can learn my face, do you have to send my image back to the cloud, or can you just send weights and coefficients and kind of the data that makes up my face, whether it's point clouds or however you want to, whatever type of camera you're using? There's so many different ways to do it. That doesn't even go into how AI can now be embedded in infrastructure to actually look for, and detect anomalies, detect unauthorized access from different pattern uses, and even the way, I type on my keyboard is something wrong, something like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do in that space. So it's limitless right now.
I totally agree with you. And you brought up right there at the end about the fact that embedding AI and checking patterns out and looking at behaviors, it's going to play a key role in security throughout the ecosystem as we continue to evolve. The last question I have today if you could be one superhero, who would it be? And have one AI superpower, what would it be?
So we're a big kind of superhero household. We look forward to all the movies and the shows that are coming out, and we have for a very long time. But I think I might go a little old school. Have you ever heard of an Avatar? The Last Airbender was the comic series. I think I would like to be an avatar and have, to your point, help society, right? Be that beacon for people and understand that. And also too, the controlling the elements, I think it's pretty cool as well. So again, if you don't really know it, you might not fully understand that, but the avatar can control all 4 of the elements of wind, earth, fire, and air.
Yes.
So it's kind of, it's different, but yeah, so I think I would go that way for the superhero. As far as the AI superpower, if I had to choose it for right now, I think it would be to be able to look into it, to actually be inside of it. If you could immerse yourself into that graph to understand how the data flows and what gets activated and where, I think that would probably be that superpower that I would want from that.
That is great. And I love the fact that you brought up the avatar. That was a good one. So thank you. Rob, for your insight and feedback today. We thank you very much. It's truly appreciated. For those that want to learn more about BrainChip, please go to our website at www.brainchip.com. Take a look around and head over to our Learn section, where you can listen to all of our podcasts, read our blogs, white papers, as well as check out some of our videos. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel by going to YouTube and subscribing to our channel at BrainChip Inc. and get access to additional videos. On behalf of the BrainChip team, we want to thank all of our listeners, investors, analysts, employees, and everyone interested in learning more about our technology. We truly appreciate all of your passion and support. Our podcast series will continue next month. Until our next podcast, we wish everyone to stay healthy, happy, and most importantly, stay out of trouble.
Thanks for listening to the BrainChip podcast. Please remember to rate and review on your favorite podcast platform.